So many of our favorites to watch. Oh look, now they're being bashed. I guess that's what we should expect on the Bullied Nostalgia Podcast. Hello and welcome to Bullied Nostalgia, the podcast where Chance,
Heyo.
John,
Yes. Chance was very far away from the phone, and I wanted him to get closer, and that.
With John, affirmative.
Okay, Kylan.
Yes.
And myself, I'm Tim, where we watch old movies and TV shows from John and my childhood and give everyone free rein to give modern commentary as to whether or not they like it.
Will some people be robots about it? Affirmative.
He caught him off guard. He was like, yes? Before we jump into it, as always, you can find us on any podcast service that your heart desires. So if you want to suggest it to a friend, we got you. All right. Today's episode, John, what are we talking about?
We are talking about Reboot.
Yes.
Correct. Reboot. What do you want me to say something more?
No, that's great. So Reboot is a TV show that first started airing in 1994. It was the first completely CG TV show.
And it shows.
It shows. I mean, we can have some pride about this. It was a Canadian television show. They actually had planned to make it and had been working on it for 10 years, but they just could not get technology to the level where they could make a TV show out of it. And even in 1994, the episodes look a little on the rough side, but they quickly do improve. I'll give them that. We watched a little bit of season 1, season 2, and season 3. And I think that they could air season 3 episodes now. The graphics aren't so bad. Oh, John disagrees. He's shaking his head.
I think you watched them like a week ago. I just watched them last night, and so I think you're forgetting.
He said that when we were watching it. I don't know what's going on with him.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
The graphics are not good.
Okay, so before we talk about the show and our enjoyment of it, I would really love to hear Chance's perception on what this show is about.
So, first things first, it seems like the plot changes per season, whether that be who the main character is or what the end goal is. Season 1, you meet a group of characters. I know Bob and Enzo are two of them, but I cannot remember the elder sister's name.
Dot.
Yep. In the first season, they're just trying to stop a virus named Megabyte from taking over the computer they live in, while also trying to stop the person who owns the computer from winning any of the games they play. Because if they do, all the people who are currently in the computer die.
Which has got to be really frustrating for the person who's using
he's
this
never won a
computer.
game, ever.
No, he's won some games. There's people who've died for sure. A little bit more context. This was essentially Toy Story for computers. This essentially says that when we turn on our computer, when we play a game, what's happening on the inside of the computer is there's all these living sprites, and they're fighting off viruses and trying to keep the computer running properly. But every time you play a game, the reason why video games were so hard back in the day is because each of the non-player characters were literally fighting for their lives. And if the person playing the game wins, all those sprites die. And so it's up to Bob, Enzo, and Dot to defend the mainframe or the computer from not only viruses, but the user from damaging their city.
By the second season, we're introduced to some new characters. One of them's a fish girl,
Oh, Andrea.
Andrea, and then there's also a hacker
Mouse. Yep.
mouse. Essentially, the person who owns this computer is trying to access Wi-Fi, and that apparently unleashes a great evil, which the characters try to stop. And then by the third season, we have the most dramatic shift in that Bob, the main character, dies, quote unquote, or he's gone somewhere. The main character shifts over to Enzo, who turns into a full-on grown man in the internet, trying to make their way back to mainframe, which Megabyte has supposedly taken over.
He says supposedly, because we only watched, like, 6 episodes in total.
It was more like 4.
No, it was 6 episodes
Was it?
spread over 3 seasons.
Oh, it felt like 4 from how much information we
So
got.
we watched 1 episode from season 1, 2 episodes from season 2, and 3 episodes from season 3.
It did not feel like 3. Oh, no,
So-
it was 3 from season 3. Oh, boy.
This was a little bit fun because Tim said, well, John, you pick 3 episodes and I'll pick 3 episodes and we'll watch 6 episodes total. So the combination of episodes we ended up watching was quite the mishmash.
There
John-
was one episode we watched in particular of John's choosing, where Enzo inadvertently lowers the graphics in the computer. So although the show already looked pretty awful, it became almost unbearable to watch.
It hurt my head to watch that episode. The graphics were so bad.
It was truly terrible.
So to pick the 3 episodes, I looked at synopsis online to be like, oh yeah, which are some episodes that remind me of my childhood or whatever, and tried to pick the ones that stood out, but I don't think they were all winners.
At least
I
you're-
remember hating this episode.
At least you admitted it. I was trying to craft some type of narrative of what the show was to the boys, and John picked the most random ones that don't propel the plot forward or introduce most of the characters. And,
I don't think we saw Megabyte do a single thing.
yeah, so Megabyte is the big bad guy, and in the 6 episodes we watched, he's barely in any of them. Apologies in advance. When the boys and I watched these episodes, I tried to say Megabyte, and every time I accidentally said Megatron. So
did.
if I refer to this as a transformer multiple times, I can't help it, sorry. We talked a little bit about how bad the graphics were, and that was because of the limitations of technology. And so when we were talking about the Dougal movie, we talked about the graphics, and John talked about how hideous the movie was, and I talked a little bit about how Pixar was strategic with Toy Story. They knew what they couldn't animate well. And so that's why Reboot is inside this computer in this fictional space, is they decided that that was what they had the best chance of animating believably.
Polygons.
Polygons.
As a kid watching it, I knew they were in a computer, but I didn't really understand what was going on. But as mishmashed of episodes that Chance and Kai got, I feel like with them being the generation that's even more technological than any generations before, I thought maybe they could really relate to the characters and their language.
Yeah, I really related to when hexadecimal
Tuesday.
used Microsoft Paint. Yeah.
They do use MS Paint.
So they use their own kind of language. When they say, instead of saying like awesome, they're like alphanumeric, which I feel like I hear you guys say.
No. They do say something like that in Adventure Time, though. They say...
Yeah, they say mathematical.
Yeah.
Also, when Enzo's upset with himself the one episode, he says, I'm so basic, which I think I do hear your generation say.
Certain characters I actually very much liked, and some looked really good. For example, I think Megabyte actually serves pretty well in the CG environment. I think it suits the way he looks, because he's not human. He's supposed to be almost metallic, like a robot. Another character who's animated really well is Hexadecimal. She looks great, because they chose to make it so that every time she's talking, when she changes emotions, the camera will cut to a different scene, and her facial expression will have physically changed in that instance. And that serves to her being kind of psychotic and her having very quickly shifting emotions. The third other character I did not expect to enjoy so much was Doctor, one of the random ones who are the NPCs in the show. He is a guy who works for Megabyte. He has a silly little accent, and he's actually animated and voiced surprisingly well out of all the characters. So oddly enough, the villains were my favorite parts.
Yeah, so Megabyte is the main bad guy, as we said, and Hexadecimal is his sister. He's more logical and strategic, and she's kind of a loose cannon.
She's raw powered.
I actually found the NPCs, or the extras that are running around the city, they remind me a lot of the minions from Despicable Me.
Oh, yeah. I think we commented on that, actually.
I think Kai said that.
No, you said that. I had nothing to do with that. You said that.
Whoa, Kylan defending the minions pretty harshly there.
Somebody said
not want to be
minions,
associated
and
with
I try and avoid thinking about minions at all costs. So
Don't you dare insult my minions.
I did not bring that up.
Kylan, what's your relationship with minions?
I hate them. I did not say it.
Okay, so this TV show debuted on YTV. That was like kids programming here in Canada.
Yeah, I grew up with YTV.
And it was quickly purchased by ABC. But ABC had extremely strict censorship rules. And it might not have just been ABC, in all honesty. It was American cartoons. We know a lot about the censorship issues that TV shows had to go through because Bruce Timm would be so vocal about them with Batman the Animated Series. ABC essentially bought the show, but because of that, Reboot had to be extremely clean without any of the 9 censorship rules that American Kids TV came with. Halfway through season 2, ABC cancels Reboot, and then they continue to air the show in Canada without any of those censorship regulations that previously existed. So what you'll notice, not only
the tone shift.
Yes, the tone shift is extreme. It goes way dark, way fast, but there's also funny little gags. For instance, the episode that we watched where Megabyte, the episode that we watched where Megabyte launches Bob into the net, they're fighting alongside each other, and then Megabyte's troops turn on them. And the ones and zeros, all the sprites, they say dialogue like, "It's the ABCs! They've turned on us!" And that type of vocabulary, never trust the ABCs. There is a very thinly veiled insult or stab at the ABC network that had canceled them earlier in the season. But, like I said, because they were no longer airing in the States, they were given creative liberties, and they were able to go in a much darker direction. I watched Reboot the early seasons when I was quite young, and then I wouldn't rediscover it until midway through season 3. I was in maybe grade 7, and so Reboot didn't really seem like a show that a junior high kid would be interested in. But like I said, it takes a much darker turn and really becomes quite edgy.
You can tell because at least 2 people die in every episode.
Lots of death.
And the main character has guns.
Most people have guns.
He really likes to shoot things. And he has some deep-rooted anger management. What are people's thoughts about the early Reboot seasons that we watched? Like Hexadecimal plays with MS Paint and Enzo turns down the graphics card on the computer, versus Bob getting launched into the internet, Andrea shooting a lady in the throat with her claws, and Matrix shooting everything that he could see.
I'm going to make a pretty clear statement here in that the first season, second season range is just them taking what they have and playing with it. They've got a computer, let's mess with the graphics. They've got a computer, let's mess with MS Paint. But then as time goes on, they just start to go further into this fantasy kind of thing where it's just whatever they want, they can kind of make it happen, which I thought was cool.
In the third season, the 2 episodes we watched, one was a Star Trek-themed superhero spoof, and the other was a Western.
Well, the other episode in season 3 was the Mortal Kombat one.
That's true.
And I mentioned that everything is much darker. You don't see it, but Satan tears people's heads off.
Yeah, his name is Satan. That's the guy the player chooses to fight as. Personally, I would say I was not super interested in the heroic side of the cast. Most of them I didn't find likable for one reason or another. Like, Enzo in the first couple seasons is mostly just genuinely annoying. And Bob, his more intelligent and well-thought-out counterpart, is just boring.
There is this character I like, who's kind of a side character. He would be considered probably a good guy. His name is Mike.
Mike the TV.
There is a newscast reporter who had a somewhat decent role in 2 of the episodes we watched, and he's a lot of fun.
This show had a lot of issues because ABC cut its funding midway through season 2. So season 3 ends in 1997. Then it wouldn't get a season 4 until 2001. So there's a 4-year break there. And then in 2001, season 4 ends in a cliffhanger, which has never been resolved. And any hope that I think anyone has had to ever bring this show back has been ruined by Netflix. Because they made a reboot show that was terrible.
It got released. I never saw this.
Oh, it was like 6 years ago. Don't watch it.
Is it live action?
Yes.
What? What? I'm so excited.
Don't be.
Why didn't anyone tell me about this?
Because it's terrible.
Is it the same characters?
They make cameos. It essentially is Power Rangers. Kids in the real world become guardians and then go into the net and defend mainframe from viruses. And then, well, I think one of the viruses they fight is Megabyte. And sometimes someone like Bob will show up or something.
I think it's funny because this is the equivalent of John getting happy for the Avatar movie. The one that was really
Avatar
bad and had
movie.
like
Yeah,
7 rock benders move a single pebble.
He's talking about Avatar The Last Airbender.
Benders.
Yeah.
I got excited about that movie?
No, he's saying it's
Too.
an analogy. He's saying everyone hates this sequel version or remake version.
Right.
And you're excited about it. And I just really want to squash that right now because
I think we're going to watch some
left
episodes
unchecked.
No, we're not.
So the worst part is not only did Netflix make a bad show, that's every day.
They made a bad show that people had initially liked.
And that show didn't have an ending. So any people who thought that they would finish up that story now don't get to.
Did this TV... Sorry, I'm just
you're
really... This
enamored.
episode has become about the live-action TV show. Did the live-action TV show pick up where...
No.
Okay.
Nothing to do with it. At all.
Nothing to do with it. So I don't know if we want to lean into this at all, but Bruce Timm with the Batman animated series would tell us what the censorship rules were that he was not allowed to have in Batman. And we can layer these on top of Reboot.
I remember one of them.
What was that?
I don't think you're allowed to have a gun pointed at the screen.
Yeah, no guns, which is why the early seasons don't really have guns.
As soon as the restrictions were cut, there's a scene where Mouse and Dot are talking to each other about a war, and Dot busts down a door holding a minigun like the size of 2 of her stacked on top of each other.
Just gluttonous. Just like, oh, now we get guns, so let's pick guns bigger than people. Well, no, like they lean heavily into guns. Matrix uses his gun for everything, But Bob had glitch. That was not a gun.
It was a watch.
It was a watch. So it was no guns, no drugs, no alcohol, no nudity, no breaking glass,
Weird.
no smoking, no child endangerment, no religion, and no strangulation.
Pretty sure Enzo is a child. So is he never in danger?
Well, the child endangerment certainly happens in the Mortal Kombat episode when there's also religious themes. We can only fathom as to what had changed in those first season and a half to make it past ABC's censorship. I'd like to ask everyone, I'd like to know if people liked the first episodes that we watched or the last episodes that we watched.
I think what Tim's getting at is I picked all the first episodes. And he
No,
picked all the last episodes.
It's not that. I want to know if people like this show at all, and if they did, if they liked the episodes while they were under heavy censorship restrictions, or if they liked it when it was much darker.
I think there are parts that I did enjoy, but there are also some things that I found to be glaring issues. Particularly season 1, just most of it, I would consider not very likable. The episode where Enzo turns out to be graphics, a pretty bad episode. I'm sure it's probably one of the worst ones in the season, so I can't qualify it all to be that bad. The season 3, from what we saw, and season 2, I'd consider to be good improvements. However, there were still problems with them. For example, in season 3, the few episodes we saw, they did have more of an emphasis on action and stuff, but I feel like they had a really bad time imposing exposition in an interesting way.
I feel like the show is really good at creating interesting concepts. There's a whole lot of stuff in the show that I would like to see in maybe a slightly different light or done in a slightly different way. Even just talking about concepts after the fact, we were told that hexadecimal and megabyte came from the same virus, which is really interesting. Something that I really liked is in the 3rd season, the main characters are jumping from computer to computer, and looking at it, I think the computer that you started with, the mainframe, is probably the least interesting one. They go to this western kind of port city, and it's super cool in comparison to just the generic high-tech city that you start out in.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing about season 3, and we've talked about it, how different themes of the episodes we watched, but that was pretty much every single episode was them going to a different movie property.
So the Western episode we watched was actually the episode that got me into Reboot in junior high. And so that's why I wanted to watch that one. It is the only one of the episodes that we watched that's actually nostalgic for me. And it might not be a high bar to clear. I think it's actually the best of the 6 episodes we watched.
I roll.
You don't think it's the best?
I just think this is all about Tim picked the better episodes than John did.
John,
I just want to point
all
out.
I'm
So,
saying-
guys, like, what'd you think? The ones that John picked sucked, right?
Personally,
all I'm
Western
saying-
episode wasn't as good as Bob being stupid episode. Highlight of mine.
All I'm saying, John, is that 2 of the episodes you picked were of a main character being stupid and graphics were terrible, and then the other one was poor imitation of Star Trek characters. I don't think you win this fight.
I'm not trying to win this fight. I just feel like someone really wants me to lose this fight.
John, did any of these episodes spark nostalgia for you?
The paint one did for sure. And it was actually interesting because we'd watch, there's the theme song, and it just essentially shows clips of different episodes. And I'm like, oh, that episode, and I had that toy, and that toy, and that toy, and so.
Would anyone consider watching more of these episodes?
I had known about Reboot before we watched this show. I had a friend of mine who was very into it, and they claimed that some of the later season 3 and early season 4 episodes were their personal favorites because the darker tone, and you get into a scenario where Enzo, who is now Matrix, finally gets back to mainframe. So I'd be interested to see those, maybe, but I probably wouldn't go much further than that.
Was your friend sitting at this table?
Is it me?
Kind of want a
Okay.
Reboot t-shirt.
Just the symbol, so you could go like, reboot, boop, boop.
I want to be a wizard. Reboot.
I would
You
do
know,
that.
I-
A pin. Kai, would you go back to this show?
I don't think I would come back to seasons 1 or 2. Season 3, I'd like to see some of the other computers, and maybe the finale of that one. Then I have no idea what season 4 is, so I'd be fine with those.
What I have to hand it to them on is season 2, they open the gateway to the internet and monsters start pouring in. So you think that that's going to be the enemy or the threat, but then the threat is Megabyte and he betrays them, launches Bob into the internet, and he's gone. And so then season 3 picks up there. They're fighting Megatron.
Megabyte.
Oh my
Megabyte.
goodness. They're fighting Megabyte, and it's extra hard because this same group was making a Transformers show at the same time. And they also made a character named Megatron, and the guy who voices like Optimus Prime is definitely in the episodes that we watched.
And Mousetrap and... Yeah, it's actually like... the-
Rat Trap, I got you.
Sorry. Oh my goodness, Mousetrap. They,
And then Bob, sorry, Bumblebee.
They have the same composer, I'm sure, too. The music's like
Well,
exactly the
lots
same.
of hardcore riffs on the guitar there. But yeah, then they're fighting Megabyte, and then Enzo ends up in the net. And in the episode we met, we find out that all the other Guardians have been infected by a virus called Damon. And so season 3 continues following Matrix and Andrea trying to find their way back home. They get back home. They fight Megabyte. That's the end of season 3. Season 4 comes back. Then we start getting into the Damon storyline. So even though they were failing to produce the show, they definitely had seeded ideas and planned things far in advance. The story arcs were overarching throughout the whole show. They tell you about a villain and then not show you that villain for another season. The attack from the monsters of the internet was by Damon. So that means that Damon sent an attack in season 2, and then you don't even meet Damon until season 4.
Okay, so in the Matrix, for no reason, there are numbers that aren't ones and zeros, which doesn't make sense because numbers that aren't ones and zeros are made up of ones and zeros. And their entire purpose in the entire show is just to make number puns. We see an 8, and he says, "I ate exercise." And that's the only time we see him. I hate these numbers.
I think Chance said he really liked that.
I think I most like just how angry it made Kylan.
Yeah, Kai's actually spent some time researching
Binary.
code, so he knows more about it than I ever expected to.
Yeah, I don't know what the first 3 digits would need to be a number. But it would be 3 numbers, combinations of ones and zeros, and then 0, 1, 0, 0, 0.
Yeah. And so Kylan especially grew angry when he heard the number pun because he was reminded of just how often number puns appear in binary.
Number puns never appear in binary.
Okay, let's take this to closing. Chance, you want to give us plus minus?
Yeah. Probably from what I saw, I'd probably give this a +3. I wouldn't recommend it, I don't think. But if you like it, I'm not going to argue against it. It's just not my personal favorite.
John, would you watch this again or more of this? I didn't ask you that, I guess.
Yeah, it's not as good as I remembered. The dialogue can be pretty choppy, and the graphics are too. Especially when they get into fist fights, it's hard to watch.
The part where Andrea spins around and knocks over all those enemies.
Oh, I forgot about that.
That's maybe the most inexcusable part. I can't.
So, yeah, it is worse than I remember. There is a part of me that's invested in the bigger story and what happens with the characters, and so I kind of wouldn't mind watching like a half-an-hour recap of the entire show on YouTube or something like that, but I don't know that I could sit through all the episodes. I feel like there could be a better use of my life. So.
than
You
watching
don't want to
Reboot.
devote your life to Reboot? You just got excited about a remake show that I warned you was bad. And you're telling me you wouldn't go back and spend time watching the good version of the show?
Well, I didn't say that I'd be excited to watch the Reboot remake.
Yes, you did. You said we were watching it tonight.
Yes, hold on. I'm not finished. Isn't it funny that a reboot of Reboot? Isn't that like...
Reboot squared?
No,
Reboot,
what I was
what
going to
worse?
say is that I'm excited to watch it with someone, not by
Emily?
myself.
Hey, honey, when we get married, I have something to show you.
No, I think the idea of watching it with the three of you and watching you suffer through it.
We already
It's like
suffered through the
asking
first
Chance to
episode
watch
you made us
Dougal
watch
again.
John.
Okay, Kai, talk cookies. What do we got?
I don't know what kind of cookie it was, but I certainly took a bite.
Ah, hang up the phone.
Would you say it was a megabyte?
I'm leaving the house.
I'm proud of you, Kai. That was good. I really thought you were going to shift from cookies to chips and give us some microchips or something.
No.
But megabyte was good. That was good.
I also feel like cookies are a computer thing now, too, so...
That's
Oh,
true.
yeah.
I could have leaned into that.
We didn't accept these cookies.
I don't know what to say. I've been in Vancouver a lot recently, and on one of my trips, they lost all my luggage. So
I was forced to watch Reboot.
you're joking, but I'm not.
Oh.
All I had access to was Tubi, and it's a bad selection of options on a streaming service. So I didn't want to ruin my experience with you guys, so I only watched season 4. But that's pretty fresh in my memory. I don't know, you guys. This show is fine.
Will you ever watch it again?
I will probably forget at some point that this show is just fine. It's interesting, though, because Matrix is so unlikable.
Yeah.
But when I was in junior high,
He's so cool.
this had a profound influence on the artwork that I was doing at the time and the cartoons and comics I was drawing.
No. It has a real-world counterpart. It's called the Shadow the Hedgehog syndrome. Nobody likes Shadow the Hedgehog, but for some reason everyone's obsessed with him.
I don't know. We all make stupid mistakes when we're young. Mine
I
was
know.
being impressionable and liking Matrix, I guess.
Mine was letting
Pandora
my dad read
is also-
Sonic Archie comics to me when I was young, I guess.
Andorra is also really unlikable.
Andrea?
Yeah.
One episode where Star Trek characters, she's just the worst. She just doesn't want to hear anything that those people are saying, and instead she lets out the potentially dangerous little balls of light.
There's a scene where they kiss, and
It's
John...
really uncomfortable.
John had some questions about it. I believe
Okay, no,
I
let's
believe
not
what
say
he
that. Let's
said
not
was,
say that.
Is that what it looks like when I kiss someone? Yeah, well, maybe. Who's to say?
Yeah, John, it's your polygon lips. We don't know.
Oh! I've got one thing to talk about real quick. When Enzo falls into the main code of the computer, he gets stuck in a whole bunch of opened windows.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
that was cool. I like that.
I think I was asleep.
Probably.
You watched these episodes late at night when Chance was sleeping?
No.
He was sleeping the whole time.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why he only remembers 4 episodes.
Yeah, all we're doing is just filling out the podcast with the deep-rooted lore of my narcolepsy.
Helping Chance sleep 1 podcast episode at a time.
Chance, can you tell me?
It's coming full circle. In the first episode of this season, we talked about you sleeping through most of it.
Yeah, Chance, can you tell me when Enzo ate the crystal and crawled out of the hole as Matrix, please?
And then the crystal was all of a sudden there again. Okay, well, look out for strangers and
Look out for weirdos, Mr. Megatron.
I can't say anything anymore.
Look out for stranger.
They're way more dangerous. Stranger danger.
Look out for Megatron. Sneak up on
Look
you.
out for viruses.
Look out for whatever you want to look out for. Don't let us tell you what to do.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. Have a great night.